America's Got Talent's Richard Goodall just confirmed what no one dared to say. He walked onto the America's Got Talent stage in a plain shirt, just a school janitor from Indiana. But when Richard Goodall opened his mouth to sing, the world stopped. Millions watched in awe as this quiet, humble man delivered one of the most unforgettable performances the show had ever seen. The confetti rained down, the crowd roared, and overnight he became a national sensation. But behind that smile was a story no one saw coming. A life filled with heartbreak, loss, and a secret weight that shaped every note he sang. And when the cameras stopped rolling, Richard made a decision that stunned his fans and finally confirmed what so many had quietly suspected all along. This isn't just a story of talent, it's a story of resilience, mystery, and one man's unexpected journey toward the truth. How the world discovered Richard. Before the world knew his name, before the viral clips and standing ovations, Richard Goodall was just a familiar face in a middle school hallway. At West Vigo Middle School in Terre Haute, Indiana, he wasn't a celebrity or a singer. He was the janitor, the guy who always smiled, the one who swept floors while humming old rock songs and gave high fives to kids having a bad day. He showed up every morning, rain or shine, did his job, and quietly carried a voice that nobody, not even Richard himself, realized would one day shake the nation. In 2022, everything changed. It started with a routine day at school, just like any other. Richard was finishing up his work when a group of students gathered near the hallway. As he often did, he began to sing. This time, Journey's classic anthem, Don't Stop Believin'. His voice echoed off the walls, strong and soulful, not forced or flashy, just pure. But unlike every other day, someone pulled out a phone, hit record, and uploaded the video online. No one could have predicted what came next. The video exploded. First a few hundred views, then thousands, then millions. It spread across TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. What started as a casual moment in a middle school hallway had turned into a cultural moment. News outlets picked it up, morning shows replayed the clip, comment sections overflowed with emotional responses. People weren't just watching, they were connecting. Something about Richard's voice, his story, his presence, it resonated. Suddenly, talent scouts and television producers were reaching out. Messages poured in from all directions. But while the internet buzzed with excitement, Richard didn't change. He still woke up early, put on his uniform, and headed to work like always. He wasn't chasing fame. In fact, the attention felt almost foreign to him. Because for Richard, this wasn't a plan. There had never been a blueprint for becoming famous. His life was rooted in Indiana. Simple, steady, filled with familiar faces and honest work. He was born in Indianapolis and had spent nearly all of his life in Terre Haute. He never saw himself as someone destined for stardom. He was just a man who loved to sing. At school, he wasn't the janitor with the golden voice. He was the guy who made the kids laugh, the one who knew their names, who made them feel seen. Over the years, he'd become a quiet part of the school's heartbeat. And while the rest of the country had just discovered him, his students already knew what the world was about to find out. There was something special about Richard Goodall. But as America turned its attention toward him, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity came knocking, and it would send Richard on a journey he never expected. From school halls to AGT spotlight. When America's Got Talent called, Richard wasn't ready. At least not in the way most contestants are. He hadn't rehearsed in studios or studied stage presence. He didn't have a stylist or a plan. What he had was a voice, a story, and a town full of people who believed in him. In May 2024, Richard boarded a plane to Los Angeles for the first time in his life. For a man who had never traveled far from Indiana, this wasn't just a trip, it was a leap into the unknown. With nothing but a duffel bag, a nervous smile, and the support of his school and town behind him, Richard stepped into a world of cameras, flashing lights, and millions of eyes watching. Most people arrive at AGT chasing fame. Richard arrived hoping someone would listen. When he walked onto the stage, the contrast was striking. He looked like someone who belonged in a school hallway, not under a spotlight. The judges greeted him kindly, but the audience didn't know what to expect. There was a quiet uncertainty in the air, until the music started. Then everything changed. The first notes of Don't Stop Believin' poured out of him, clear, powerful, and full of emotion. The timid janitor vanished. In his place stood a man channeling decades of life into every single word. The crowd rose to their feet. The judges stared in disbelief. Heidi Klum reached for the golden buzzer, and in an instant confetti rained down on Richard as he stood there, stunned and speechless. The moment went viral, again. Only this time, it wasn't a hallway performance. It was a national awakening. America had officially met Richard Goodall. But for Richard, this wasn't about a gold button or millions of views. It was about using this stage, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, to honor the people who had supported him long before the cameras rolled. Every performance became a tribute. In the quarterfinals, he sang How Am I Supposed to Live Without You, dedicating it to his fiancée Angie. The emotion in his voice brought the crowd to tears and gave viewers their first glimpse of the heartbreak he carried. Then, in the semifinals, he flipped the script. Eye of the Tiger revealed a whole new side of Richard. Fierce, energetic, commanding. He wasn't just a feel-good story anymore, he was a real contender. And when the finale came, Richard returned to his roots. He performed faithfully, pouring every heartbreak, every loss, every hope into that one final song. It wasn't just a performance, it was a release. And when the winner of season 19 was announced, it was Richard Goodall. Confetti fell again, but this time something had shifted. This wasn't just a win for Richard. It was a win for every dream that had been buried under years of silence. A voice that once echoed in school hallways had filled a national stage and changed the game completely. The pain behind the power. To millions of viewers, Richard's voice sounded effortless, powerful, warm, and impossibly steady. But what the world didn't see was the weight behind every note he sang. His rise on America's Got Talent looked sudden, almost magical, but the truth was far more complicated. Richard had been carrying years of disappointment, heartbreak, and quiet struggle long before his viral moment ever existed. Long before AGT, he once tried to chase his dream the traditional way. He auditioned for The Voice, hoping maybe, just maybe, someone would notice him. He didn't ask for fame, he just wanted to be heard. But nothing came of it. No callback, no encouragement, not even a small sign that he should keep going. Just silence, the kind that stings a little deeper when you finally work up the courage to try. So Richard did what most people do after rejection. He went back to life quietly, without complaint, and kept the dream tucked away where it couldn't hurt as much. But music didn't leave him. He joined a small gospel band, performing at local events, church gatherings, and community shows. Those moments gave him something to hold on to, a family of musicians who believed in him. For a while, it felt like he belonged to something bigger. But when the pandemic hit, everything crashed at once. Venues shut down. Rehearsals stopped. The band fell apart overnight. Another door closed. Then came the heartbreak that truly reshaped his life. In 2021, Richard lost his first wife, Patricia Sue, to kidney cancer. She had been his partner, his encourager, the person who saw the best in him, even when he doubted himself. Losing her shattered him in ways he didn't talk about publicly. Suddenly, the routines they built together disappeared. The house felt larger, the days felt quieter. He still showed up to work, because that's the kind of man he was, but the grief followed him everywhere. That kind of pain doesn't vanish. It settles into the background of your life, shaping you quietly. When viewers watched him sing emotional songs on AGT and felt something deeper in his voice, they were hearing those years, the heartbreak, the loss, the rebuilding. His performances weren't polished or theatrical. They were lived in. They came from years of singing through pain, because sometimes music is the only thing that helps you breathe again. But the challenges didn't stop there. After AGT brought him into the national spotlight, the whirlwind of traveling, rehearsals, interviews, and constant pressure caught up with him. His body finally pushed back. He needed hernia surgery, something he kept private at first. The recovery forced him to pause everything, giving him time to reflect on how drastically his life had transformed in such a short time. One moment he was waxing school floors, the next he was performing for millions, and suddenly, he was back home, healing, wondering what came next. Yet through all this, Richard never let bitterness take root. Every setback, Every heartbreak, every loss added another layer to the voice America fell in love with. His performances were powerful not because of perfect technique, but because they were honest. And little did he know, even in the middle of grief and rebuilding, someone was about to enter his life who would change everything and help him face a truth he never expected to find. Angie, the love that helped him heal. Some people come into your life quietly, not with fanfare, not with fireworks, but with steadiness. For Richard, that person was Angie. Long before the bright lights and camera flashes, before America's Got Talent turned his world upside down, Angie saw him for who he truly was, not a viral star, not a singer waiting to be discovered, just Richard. A kind man with a voice full of soul and a heart full of scars. They met in 2022, right in the middle of the quiet when he was still just the school janitor who sang to himself in the hallways. Angie didn't fall in love with fame. She fell in love with the man behind it, the one who worried, the one who doubted himself, the one who had carried so much pain and still chose to smile. She became his anchor. As the competition ramped up and the pressure of national attention grew heavier, Angie stayed by his side. Through every callback, every emotional performance, every moment of fear, she was there encouraging him, calming him, reminding him that he was worthy. While the rest of the country saw Richard as a breakout star, Angie saw the man she already loved, and that made all the difference. Just days before the AGT finale, the two tied the knot. Quietly. No headlines, no red carpets. Just love, simple and true. And in a way, it made his final performance on the show even more meaningful. He wasn't just singing to win a competition, he was singing from a place of healing, with someone in the audience who believed in him long before the world did. But Angie's role in his life went far beyond emotional support. She also pushed him to confront something he had never dared to face: the mystery of his past. For years, Richard had lived without knowing his biological father. It was a gap in his story he had quietly accepted. Life had moved on. The silence had become normal. But Angie believed he deserved answers. With her encouragement, Richard finally began searching. What he found shocked him. His father, a retired K-9 police officer and Army veteran, had no idea Richard even existed. Alongside him were 3 siblings Richard had never met. A whole family he didn't know he had. The reunion wasn't dramatic or scripted for television. It was real, emotional, and life-changing. For a man who had once felt unrooted, suddenly finding that connection added a new chapter to his identity, not one that replaced his past, but one that deepened it. Richard shared the news publicly in the most humble way, thanking Angie for giving him the courage to look. "Had it not been for her," he wrote, "I wouldn't have tried." And in that simple sentence was the story of their bond. She didn't just support his journey, she helped rewrite it. What Richard didn't know was that his biggest surprise was still ahead. Because after the finale, after the standing ovation and the confetti, the entire country was about to be stunned by a decision no one expected. The shocking decision after AGT win. When Richard Goodall stood center stage as the winner of America's Got Talent, the world assumed they knew what came next. After all, this is the part where stars are born, right? Big city record deals, TV appearances, luxury homes, maybe even a Grammy nomination in the distance. The audience, the judges, even reporters outside the studio all expected the same thing. Richard would leave his janitor job behind and step into his new life as a full-time musician. But Richard had other plans. In the days following his victory, while fans celebrated and industry insiders buzzed about his future, Richard quietly packed his bags and returned to Indiana. Not for a break, but to go back to work. That's right, the newly crowned AGT champion walked back into West Vigo Middle School and clocked in as the janitor. People were stunned. Interviews rolled in, asking him why. Why not ride the wave of fame? Why not relocate to LA, sign a deal, or at least take a break from cleaning classrooms? But Richard's answer wasn't flashy. It wasn't even rehearsed. He simply said, "I never expected to win. I just wanted to sing. I plan to keep working until new opportunities come along." That humility hit fans harder than any ballad. Because while other winners chased the next big stage, Richard found comfort in the halls that shaped him. He liked his job. He liked the kids. He liked being part of something familiar. Fame had found him, sure, but it hadn't changed him. He still woke up early, still grabbed his mop and his keys, still greeted students with a smile. For him, this wasn't about trading one life for another. It was about holding on to what grounded him. And that decision, that bold, unexpected return, said more about who Richard truly was than any performance ever could. Of course, that didn't mean he ignored the opportunities coming his way. He accepted invitations to perform. He traveled to events. He shared his story with more people than ever before, but he did it his way. No agents pulling strings, no handlers reshaping his image, just Richard singing, showing up, and staying real. It would have been easy to let the spotlight swallow him whole, to abandon the job, the town, the life that made him who he was, but instead, he leaned into it. He allowed the noise to settle, and stayed exactly where he was needed. For many fans, that moment, not the golden buzzer, not the final song, was what confirmed what they already felt deep down. Richard Goodall wasn't just a voice. He was a reminder. A reminder that success doesn't have to change you, that fame doesn't have to replace fulfillment, that even in a world obsessed with chasing the next big thing, sometimes the most powerful choice is to stay right where your heart has always belonged. Slowly embracing the spotlight, even as Richard returned to his janitor job, the spotlight wasn't ready to let go. Invitations rolled in one after another. Interviews, performances, appearances. But unlike many overnight stars swept into a whirlwind of agents and obligations, Richard handled it all with the same quiet steadiness that defined his journey. He wasn't running from opportunity. He just wasn't going to chase it blindly either. One of his first big appearances after America's Got Talent was at an Indiana Pacers game. When Richard stepped out onto that court, microphone in hand, the crowd roared, not because he was a celebrity, but because he was theirs. The janitor who had once walked their same streets was now standing center stage in a packed arena, his voice echoing through the rafters. Not long after, he was invited to perform at the Circle of Lights, a beloved holiday tradition in Indiana. Families bundled in scarves and coats gathered to hear him sing. And once again, Richard delivered not just notes but feeling, the kind that warmed even the coldest winter night. Then came the Riverside Festival of Lights, another chance for his community to see him up close, not behind a screen, but in person. Every appearance, every handshake, every wave felt genuine, because it was. Richard wasn't performing as a product or a packaged brand. He was showing up as the same man who used to sweep cafeteria floors while humming Journey songs under his breath. And the recognition kept growing. He received a key to the city, a symbol of just how deeply his story had touched the people of Terre Haute. But perhaps the most emotional moment came when his own school, West Vigo Middle, held a pep rally in his honor. Students screamed his name, teachers cried, families showed up not just to see the local hero, but to say thank you. For years, Richard had quietly made their days better. Now it was their turn to cheer him on. Through all of this, Richard never stopped doing what he'd always done. He kept posting updates on social media. Sometimes a clip from a recent show, other times just a photo of him waxing floors or prepping classrooms for the next school day. To the outside world, it looked like a contradiction. How could someone be living out a dream and still be sweeping floors? But to Richard, there was no contradiction. Both were parts of him. He didn't treat fame like a finish line. He didn't let the camera flashes blind him. He let it unfold slowly, naturally, on his terms. And that quiet patience, that refusal to rush, was what made the world fall in love with him even more. Because while the stages got bigger and the crowds louder, Richard stayed exactly who he'd always been, a man who sang because it healed him, and who never forgot the place that first heard him sing. The real start of his music career. For Richard Goodall, music wasn't a marketing plan. It wasn't a job title or a brand. It was a quiet fire, something he had carried for years, long before anyone was listening. So when the spotlight finally found him, he didn't rush to cash in. He didn't ride the fame train into a flurry of quick deals or flashy endorsements. Instead, he paused, he breathed, and then slowly he began. The real beginning came on August 29, 2025, The day he released his first single, Long Time Coming. The title couldn't have been more perfect. This wasn't just a song. It was the culmination of a lifetime spent dreaming quietly and singing in the background. Now the background had become the main stage. He announced the release on social media with a message that hit straight to the heart. "Hi, this is Richard. I just wanted to share my story with you all. It's been a wild journey, and I often wake up feeling like the luckiest man in the world. Many of you have asked what I'm doing next, and I'm excited to share that my single Long Time Coming will be released on August 29th on all streaming platforms." He didn't hire a PR team to spin it. He didn't rely on headlines to carry it. He let his voice and his story speak for itself. The song was recorded in Nashville, the city where country grit meets musical soul. And while Richard could have chosen to record in LA or New York, he picked a place that felt grounded, a place that honored stories like his, the kind built on real emotion, not image. Clips of the song surfaced online. Fans listened, commented, cried. The sincerity in his voice hadn't changed, but now it had a polish, a confidence. A man who once sang in school hallways was now singing into a studio mic, and the world was still listening. But even as he recorded his solo music, Richard didn't isolate himself. He joined a local band called Sugar Street, performing at hometown venues, community fairs, and small gatherings. These weren't sold-out stadiums or massive arenas. They were intimate spaces where people came not for spectacle, but for connection. The kind of places where he could try new songs, test his voice, and grow as an artist without the pressure of fame breathing down his neck. Those performances gave him something even AGT couldn't: freedom. Freedom to rediscover who he was musically, not just as a contestant, but as a man telling his story through melody. Behind the scenes, he started working with new managers, not the kind who saw dollar signs, but the kind who understood his pace, his values, and his need to move with intention. Conversations about a full album began. Early talks of a book deal emerged, the kind that would tell his story in full, from mop buckets to microphones. Even Angie, now his wife, hinted that a biopic could be in the cards someday. When asked who should play him, Richard laughed and said, "Zac Efron." A joke, sure, but it showed how much more comfortable he was becoming with the attention, even the humor in it. He hadn't become a star overnight. He had become something more rare, a voice people trusted. And now, with the music world finally opening its doors, Richard was stepping inside not as a product, but as a person. A storyteller with something real to say, and the voice to say it. The final confirmation that shifted the story. By the time 2025 arrived, Richard Goodall had become more than a viral sensation. He was a symbol of second chances, of hidden dreams, of what can happen when the world finally hears the quietest voice in the room. But even with all his performances, interviews, and rising presence, there was one question that lingered in the minds of his fans. Was this just a beautiful detour, or was this his path now for good? For a while, Richard let the world wonder. He kept singing. He kept showing up to his job. He kept walking that delicate line between the life he'd always known and the life that was waiting for him. But when he returned to the stage for America's Got Talent's 20th anniversary special, something shifted, both in him and in how the world saw him. He opened the night with Eye of the Tiger, backed by a thunderous ensemble of past contestants. The energy was electric, but backstage something even more powerful was unfolding. For the first time since his audition, Richard watched his original clip, the one that had launched him into the national spotlight. And this time, it hit different. It wasn't just a video anymore. It was a timestamp, a before and after moment. The man who had nervously introduced himself to a panel of judges was now performing alongside legends, and as he stood there, older, wiser, and far more certain, Richard realized something. He wasn't a visitor in this world anymore. He belonged here. The night only grew more surreal. He shared the stage with Journey's own guitarist, Neil Schon, a full-circle moment that left Richard visibly emotional. It was the kind of performance he'd dreamed about quietly for decades, and now it was real. But even then, fans weren't expecting what came next. In a quiet interview weeks later, Richard finally confirmed what so many had been hoping for. Music wasn't a one-time chapter in his life. It wasn't something he planned to walk away from. It was his future, He wasn't singing just to pass the time. He wasn't balancing two lives out of uncertainty. He was transitioning slowly, deliberately into the one thing that had always been calling him, a life in music. He revealed that he and Angie had started talking seriously about the next chapter, about moving to Florida, about buying a modest home where he could rest between performances, write, record, and simply breathe. Not a mansion, not some celebrity compound, just a place where music could live in every corner. He also shared hopes of working with Simon Cowell again, not just as a mentor, but as a collaborator. Ideas for a full album were forming. Live tour dates were being explored. Conversations with publishers and producers were already underway. And maybe most surprisingly, he was thinking about retiring from the school. It wasn't an easy decision. That job had shaped him. The students had become family. The floors he mopped were part of his rhythm. But for the first time, Richard wasn't afraid to step into something new. Because now it wasn't about a golden buzzer or a viral video. It was about purpose. Music was no longer just something he did. It was who he was. And this time, he wasn't hiding it. Richard Goodall didn't ask to be famous. He didn't chase the spotlight or rehearse in front of mirrors dreaming of standing ovations. He just sang, because singing healed something in him. And in doing so, he ended up healing something in us too. He walked onto a stage as a janitor and left as a symbol of resilience. But the real twist wasn't in the performance. It was in what happened after. He returned to work. He stayed grounded. And then slowly, honestly, he stepped into a future he once believed wasn't meant for people like him. And that's what made it real. Because Richard didn't just win a competition. He confirmed what so many of us suspected deep down, that greatness doesn't always come from the obvious places. Sometimes it comes from the quiet ones, the overlooked, the people humming to themselves when no one's watching. So now the question isn't whether Richard belongs in the music world. The question is, what took so long? Do you think Richard should finally leave his janitor job behind and go all in on his music career? Let us know what you would do in the comments below. And if this story moved you like it moved us, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss the stories that deserve to be heard.